with the state. And the two are actually inseparable. That sort of idea of like McDonald's needs McDonnell Douglas, you know, the corporations needs an armed state to back up their interests. And you know, that was one of the key debates, and maybe it wasn't as clear at the time why that was so important. But when 9/11 happened, the global justice movement basically fell apart because basically there were two wings of the movement. One wing of the movement, the more left wing, and it had more, you know, anarchist politics dominated, and that those were the people that saw the state as, you know, basically irrelevant. And when 9/11 happened, they sort of saw that as a distraction. You know, then they need to get back to the business of fighting multinationals. And then the other wing, the more conservative wing of the movement, that was more like the NGOs, were just disarmed by, you know, the arguments about why we needed to go to war, like we were liberating women in Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. And basically, as soon as 9/11 happened, you know, a movement that had been building for a few years collapsed. And that's what we mean by fighting for the future of a movement, you know, as socialists. You know, people should talk about more recent examples. Obviously, in places like Egypt, you know, the question of the United Front is much more immediate, and you can see how, like, you know, had socialists in Egypt not united with like the Muslim Brotherhood, which has very different politics, in defending Tahrir Square, then we would have lost Tahrir Square. On the other hand, had the socialists not maintained their own political integrity and independence, then they would have been utterly disarmed. Now that the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, is playing a more counter-revolutionary role and trying to demobilize the movements and tell people, you know, that the military council should be, you know, who runs Egypt. So that's a very, you know, practical consequence of the United Front. So I'll just end there, really. I think, you know, the consequences for the United Front are, you know, how, when presented with struggles in the present, you know, how do we operate in a way that sets our side up for the future struggles? You know, how rooted do we become in these struggles? How much influence do we gain? How much experience do we gain in figuring out, grasping, like, what is the next key link in the chain that we're arguing for? That's a challenge for us today. I think there's tremendous potential, and we need to use these politics of this history to really rise to that challenge.
That's going to give us about 45 minutes for discussion. Even though we started a little late, we're going to try to wrap up right on time, because immediately following this workshop, there's a rally in support of Occupy Harvard. It's going to be taking place right after this final session on the steps right outside of the conference registration here. So head out there after this. We're going to start open up for discussion now. The way the discussion will work is that when folks want to speak, raise your hand. I'll keep a list of speakers and call on folks to ensure the fullest discussion possible. If you have a question, please raise a fist so I'll know to prioritize your question. Get questions out early so that they can contribute to helping shape the discussion. And for starters, I'll be keeping speakers to 3 minutes. I'll tap my pen like that. When you get to 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you know that it's time to wrap up. So you can go ahead and take the first round of hands. Okay, go ahead.
I don't know very much about this particular organization, but I've been kind of in this movement of political activists. And as part of the Occupy Boston, we united with Occupy the Hood and marched in solidarity from Dewey Square to Dudley Square, and it was very energizing and wonderful. We get to Dudley Square, and the black leadership from the black community get up, and to my sadness, the first thing they said was, "Let us pray." And we had, you know, our fists in the air. We were talking about revolution and all of this. And I think what I've been very discouraged about as about atheists is how do we unite with and struggle with, or what do we do with religion, particularly in the Black community and Latino communities, when many people feel like, well, God will provide. I don't really need to go as far as revolution because, God is going to take care of us. So my question is, what do we do with the religious element, particularly the people that we want to bring forward for a revolution?
I have you right here.
Yeah, just in response to your question, I think if we look at the history of even Christianity, we can see that Jesus was a socialist, in favor of redistribution of wealth, and that most religions at their core have this altruistic essence. In South America, there's been a movement since the 70s and 80s known as liberation theology, which is a largely militant movement based on religious principles of solidarity, and I don't think that we can dismiss those offhand. The civil rights movement here, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, so I say let us pray, let me pray, let whoever wants to pray, let whoever doesn't want to pray, and then let the prayer come to fruition, let the prayer become action, So.
Hi. I was just thinking of two examples of the dangers you were talking about of the different ways that we operate in movements. I don't know how what Socialists or ISO presence was like in the Million March for Women's Lives in DC. It like 1 million people marching. That's a lot of power, and the message at the end was like, go to the polls. Like, there's nothing. There's no aftermath, and now we see, so many years later, government coming in, swooping in, and trying to rip out rights that we won decades and decades ago because there was not that push. On the other side, I was thinking of Joel Geyer's article, Socialists and Movements, and in that, we see that in the 1960s civil rights movements, a lot of radicals didn't get involved because it wasn't radical enough. And I can't imagine looking back, having lived through that, and said, it wasn't radical enough for me. So I think that's something that we all, it's a fine line that we all have to walk, and we all have to push for this. That we do have to push people. Just like you said, people are hungry to go further. They want more. They want to have an arrow pointing in a direction. But it's important to have patience because we know it takes a lot of patience. Already we've learned it takes a whole lot of patience to be able to keep pushing through, to make sure just because it's not our politics does not mean it's not our fight and that we don't have a chance to ultimately win.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about religion involved in social movements or just involved in people in general, I think first of all, people should be able to believe whatever they want. I think that if we're talking about a united movement, that means that people should have the freedom to believe whatever they want. And I think also when we talk about the destruction of a left and why we need to rebuild a revolutionary left, it's no surprise that in the most oppressed and exploited communities that religion is sought to as an explanation because there's no real there's no real answers coming from any place else in society. So I think it's we shouldn't either be hard to say we're going to denounce anybody that says anything religious, nor should we say that that there's not an answer that lies not just in praying but also in the action that we have and the power that we have uniting together. And I think also it's totally Jesus was a socialist. It's very clear. And I think that also just to say when we talk about the civil rights movement, when we talk about the active participation of radicals that is really going to shape, the arguments that we make inside movements, whether we win them or not, is going to shape the political ideas that develop within those movements. So I think it's very key that we're there, even if we don't win all the time, even if we're still building our organization, to be part of those movements, to argue those things. And sometimes maybe that does mean that we have to be part of marches where a group of people step up and ask that we pray. But hey, as long as they say pray and not go vote, that's all that matters.
I have right in the middle, in the back here.
Actually, the comment and the flex there. Covered a lot of what I was going to say, but just to kind of bounce off that a little bit. As historical materialists, there aren't going to be a lot of devout Catholics amongst us, but I mean, as socialists, I don't think we're really demanding that people abandon their religion. We're forming religion. And it's and religion isn't a thing that's necessarily evil. Religion under capitalism is going to be an oppressive force in the same way that all powerful institutions under capitalism are oppressive forces. So I mean that's a distinction. It's a distinction also in that the rank and file religious believers are going to be a lot more progressive and even radical than the most powerful figures in religious communities. The leadership of the Catholic Church. These are distinctions that we have to keep in mind.
Okay, in the far back with the green shirt.
Yeah, I guess just to speak to this, because I actually thought the very end of where you went was not what I was expecting about, I'm not too worried about let God take care of the movement, because in my experience, God has not intervened to screw up too many movements directly himself. I thought you were going to say, let us take care of you. And that was kind of where, and what the comment was saying about the vote thing, that was kind of more where I thought you were headed with that. And I think that's an important point, more than the particular religious ideas and what we had to say about religion. And I'll just to speak a little bit from the experience. I'm from Providence, where we've got now a Latino mayor in a majority Latino city who got elected with a huge amount of the vote and has turned around and completely screwed the Latino community. Closed 5 schools, predominantly Black and Latino schools. The guy actually, we found out later, I don't know, we should have known this before, that he actually got his training as a housing court judge. So how many people did he throw on the streets to get here? But of course, he was elected with all, the complete support of everybody, all the NGOs, all the liberals, this is our guy, right? And I think this is something that happens a lot. It happens with Democrats. My sense is that there's a particular kind of dynamic when the candidate is a person of color, that there's kind of this sense of all people of color then have to get behind this person because we know how racist the establishment is. And it is, but the problem is that, that's basically they're putting a brown or a black face on an overall racist system, and that person's going to do the same thing. And so I think it's more about then how do we react to that, and how do we actually push the move, keep the movement going forward, and not get derailed. There are 2 things that I want to say about this very briefly and get them out. One is that I think our movements need to have an independent push and strategy. Our movements should never say the politicians are going to take care of us and we'll just go and do what they say. I think it's a point that seems obvious, but in the education work that we've been doing, and we directly confronted the mayor on his closing the schools, it's we had to constantly bring people back to we can't just let this other city council person who has a big mouth and says some nice things kind of lead our movement. We actually have to make our own demands, right? So I think that's one. And what was the second point? Sir?
Department of Energy.
Basically, we need to be able to, the movement needs to remain independent, and we need to fight for the independence of the movement, because it's very easy for movements to get co-opted by the forces of the ruling elite. And it's important that we, and you know, like a lot of people that we are working with now actually went and voted for Tavares. They campaigned for the guy, right? And it would be wrong, I think, for us to be like, I mean, like practically everybody in this coalition except for us, like voted for the guy and thought he was going to do great things, and now they're angry with him, right? And that sense of betrayal can be important. And yeah, sorry.
Okay, I have you with the blue jacket right here.
Okay. On the question of religion and movements, I think this is a great opportunity to apply the principles of the United Front. For example, I myself am an Orthodox Christian, which is not Catholic, but I guess close enough, and a member of the ISO. And the fact is, in every single religion that has ever existed, there are both conservative and radical trends. And from the teachings of every religion, people can draw both conservative and radical conclusions. From Christianity, you know, you can quote Acts, and all who believe were in common and had all things. All who believe were together and had all things common and distributed to everyone as they had need. Acts 2:44, 45. You can quote that and say the apostles were socialists. You can also draw conservative conclusions and say, you know, God will take care of everything. We don't need to struggle because we just need to pray and everything will be okay. It is possible for some either one of those things. And as socialists, what we want to do is to engage with people and persuade them to draw the radical conclusions. You know, capitalism is unjust. If you believe in justice, for whatever reasons that you may have, for example, because you're religious or for whatever other reason, then you should struggle against capitalism. We should engage with people and persuade them to draw that conclusion and not the other conclusions that they may draw, which is let's just hope that things fix themselves. And this is a great opportunity to apply the principles of the United Front, because what you don't want to do is, on the other hand, you don't want to just say, okay, I'll pray with you and not make any arguments at all, which is well, it's one of the things that you don't want to do. And the other thing that you don't want to do is to say, no, I disagree with you, I'm not going to pray with you, and furthermore, I'm not going to work with you at all. I will have my own separate movement. You don't want to do either of those things. You want to say, okay, you want to pray, I'm going to make an argument that you should draw certain radical conclusions from your religion, and in any case, more importantly, I'm going to make an argument that we should all work together towards the goal of defeating capitalism.
I have the red shirt in the back corner here.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Kurt.
Okay. I want to make a general point and then a specific point on this question of religion. So generally speaking, movements emerge, struggles emerge in ways that are unpredictable. And no struggle emerges according to whatever vision that we have, a particular vision that we have for how a struggle is supposed to emerge. And that's not the extent to which an emerging struggle corresponds to our perfect conception of it. That's not how we gauge how we get involved with it. If it's a genuine struggle for justice, we get involved with it. So the Occupy movement emerged in a way that I don't think any of us could have predicted. When the Occupy movement emerged and had no demands, I thought, oh, that's a terrible mistake. And then I came to see, that's actually, there's something very strong about that, because it actually can take on a lot of things. So we ourselves learn in the process of engaging with the struggle. So that's the first thing. So specifically on the question of religion, I just want to say, let's put this out there. I think that actually there's a tendency amongst radicals in the United States to have a posture toward religion that is dismissive and that's condescending. And I understand where it comes from, because we live in a country where there's a fanatical religious right, and I think that people are repulsed by that. But I also think that we have to be really mindful of that tendency. As Carmine just said, the majority of the country identifies as believing in God, okay? So there's obviously a mix of ideas amongst those people. We should be mindful of certain institutions like the Catholic Church. Obviously they have a certain role in society, right? But individual religious people are religious for all kinds of reasons. And I think that it's actually important to listen to people as we talk to and struggle about all of their ideas, political, and whether the political ideas are informed by religious ideas. Some people have a very sharp distinction between what they believe spiritually and what they believe politically. The last thing, this is really important, is there are people under attack in this country and around the world because of their religion. I'm talking about Muslims, okay? There are people that are under attack in this country for no reason other than the fact that they're Muslims. And so there's a question, where do we stand? And I think concretely, like if we're doing solidarity, at a solidarity meeting in a mosque, comrades from Boston have done it. We're in a mosque, And the prayers happen. So do you walk out and say that I'm opposed to this on political principle? Seriously, I think this is a concrete question. It's really important to put things in perspective and make sure that we're on the right side of things.
Oh, yeah, to say, I think Bree summed it pretty well, that, like, as Marxists, like, we don't want to, like, dictate, like, morality or, like, religion or whatever to people, and, I mean, even if you look at, like, religion isn't what, like, is stopping people from engaging in class struggle. Like, I'm sure that, like, in Russia, there were, like, not everyone that engaged in, like, the Russian Revolution was, like, a staunch atheist. Maybe there were, like, millions of people engaged in that. I mean, by being at Occupy the Hood, they themselves, like, obviously have shown they're, like, engaged in struggle. Like, they didn't go to, like, church just to have, like, a prayer session, which, I mean, if that was really their belief that, like, oh, just let God take care of everything, they wouldn't have been there. But, and then, yeah, like, religion is used to, like, justify, like, all sorts of things. But, I guess I wanted to bring up, like, another question, which is kind of, relates just to, like, the Occupy movement or even movements in general. Like, how do we, like, operate, like, obviously, like, as, when we're doing United Front, when there's, like, whatever, like, Tea Parties or even, like, at Occupy Boston, like, sometimes there'll be, like, whatever, with, like, racist signs and, like, what we've done usually is, like, put the signs down, so, like, that's. But, I mean, obviously, you don't want to, like, walk away and, like, be sectarian, but at the same time, you want to, like, say, like, that stuff's, like, not, those ideas aren't okay as part of the movement.
Let's see, we've got this, the list is growing and it's big. I'm going to cut us down to 2.5 minutes, and I'm also going to bump up a couple of question fists that have been raised, and then we'll get back to that list. So I have here in the front.
Well, I guess my question is sort of similar to that. I'll make it sort of quick, and it's related to the Occupy Wall Street movement. But when we're, and I guess the answer part of this is part of going to the conference, but it was a question I had coming in, is when we're doing sort of logistical organizing work in movements, how much and where is it on that scale, and how do some other comrades, I guess, judge that when to pull back on politics and do the logistics side of things to make things, kind of make things happening, or of course they're being informed. I guess that's just part of working with other people. I don't know if that was good, but maybe that shows how well we're running.
Great. And the other question was right in the middle in the far back. Okay. I've got you right here.
Well, yeah, I think that there's a really important distinction that's being made between religious institutions and religious individuals. And ultimately, it's religious individuals that are coming out to join our movements and not, at least not in this country, religious institutions. It's like we want to build a multiracial, multi-religious movement, ultimately because we want to build a broader movement, and that necessarily means that more people of faith will be getting involved with our movement. And honestly, my experience, I'm an atheist, but also a student at the Divinity School here at Harvard, and my experience has been, there's been broad layers of support, both for Occupy Harvard, but also for Occupy Boston throughout. There's either protest chapels, absolutely, there are people coming out with different ideas, but these are radicals, and ultimately people who are coming out and fighting with us are either won or being won to the efficacy of struggle. If they didn't think that struggle was necessary, then they wouldn't be out there in the first place. So I think that's really, really crucial to say. Because I think, and I agree with what Corey said, I think the left, in a lot of ways, has really got this question wrong, especially around Islamophobia, but also around other people as well. The task is not to polemicize with people around their religious beliefs. So we want to argue for them to get involved in the movement, to fight for a better world. And honestly, if those people, if part of their commitment to fighting for a better world was also being religious as well, that's absolutely fine. I think the argument has to be, that we want them to be comrades in struggle with us. And ultimately, I think the last thing that I'll say is that the Egyptian revolution can teach us something really amazing about people of faith overthrowing. And those people in Egypt were not taking a back seat. People, they were. And I think when I was in Egypt this summer, I met plenty. The meeting. I went to the meetings of the Revolutionary Socialism. Meeting started at 9 o'clock because I was there during Ramadan. And one of those are some of the most incredible, committed activists I've ever met. So we can absolutely take a page out of their book.
Okay, I want to say sounds like folks have done a really good job of taking up and engaging with the question about religion and its relationship to the United Front. I just want to encourage folks to raise any other questions or any other points related to the United Front, Hadas' talk. Take up the question that came from the front about how do we balance projecting our politics versus doing concrete movement building work, etc. So I'd also just encourage any other questions to get out there. Next I have Ben.
Well, first of all, I do want to say one final thing. I think it's really move on to other ideas. It's important to remember that, yes, religious institutions and religious ideology has been used as an oppressive means throughout the history of this country, but it has also played a very important transgressive role. Many of the most dedicated abolitionists like John Brown based their opposition to slavery on their religious ideas. The populist movement at the end of the 19th century was tied inextricably with religious fundamentalism, of that sort of area. And also, we can't forget the role that Dr. King played in Southern Christian Leadership Conference in the 1960s, however limited their idea then. But what's important for us to draw as a lesson from this whole idea is that it's perfectly okay to disagree with other people about certain individual causes as long as we focus on the major enemies ahead of us, the institutions that oppress our society and the people who control it. That in the end, really, it's not about what it's more so about our actions than our individual reasons for those actions. As long as people think that we need to mobilize that, we need to fight for a better world, then it's perfectly fine by me that they're religious. I would like to say on the question of how we deal with the Occupy Wall Street movement, we already have kind of a tradition in the ISO around this in terms of democratic centralism and the idea that we can meet up somewhere separate from the movement, close the door, have a really long, bitter argument, and have a vote that everyone might not agree on. But once the decision is made, once we walk out of that room, we represent the ISO as one group of people, and we don't allow any disagreements we might have undermine our cause.
I have the blue sweatshirt on the steps here.
Yeah, I have a question, and I think it's similar to Lindy's question, which is just like, is there ever a time when, because I think like the Occupy Wall Street in general is kind of politically ambiguous and politically mixed. So like, is there ever a time when a struggle that's ostensibly for something progressive is something that we should actually back out of because there's enough like backwards elements within that specific group of people? Like, I think I'm thinking, so like, just to explain, like at UMass, it's like UMass students and comrades were involved in student GAs, like general city student GAs, and there were like a lot of backwards racist ideas, like sexist ideas within those broader student GAs, and then like students from other schools were engaging with the police and like actually trying to meet with the police, and students from UMass had been arrested and were actually afraid of the cops. And so like that, we ended up like staying involved in that, and that actually turned out well for us. Like we were able to like sway people's, we were able to like make some really good arguments and attract people to us. But then like, I think the question is like, for example, like the direct action working group. It's like they are like completely undemocratic. They try and just like seize control of everything. It's like ostensibly, the direct action working group is to further the movement, but they're actually like pushing it backwards. So I guess I'm wondering like, where is the line? Like we're not involved in the direct action, and I think that's right. But it's like, where is, sometimes that line seems a little blurry to me. Like how do we figure out whether to keep fighting with those people, because radical people are being attracted to the group and we want to make arguments in that group, versus how do we decide, it's actually time to pull out, because even though this is supposed to be something progressive, it's like this is just demoralizing our comrades, this is a waste of our time, this is a bad group to be involved in. I'm confused.
Okay. I have the white shirt over here. Yep.
Okay, I kind of have a question too. So I went to Occupy a bit here, and it's just interesting the observation you made, because like I feel like to take a snapshot of that time when someone asked for prayer, and say that there was like a block of folks who were like And then when you would talk to people, because we were tabling, people were like, we need to end capitalism. Racism comes from capitalism. I totally agree with you. Like, that was the night for me. That's what I took away. And I actually left feeling like a heavy question of like, actually a lot of folks here, they have a lot of agreement with what socialists have to say. So I'm not sure if my question actually fits the purview, but I kind of felt like I don't know how to really argue for some, or start an argument or discussion with some of those folks about why you need to join a socialist organization. We agree, and we're both here, and we're both trying to build this movement. Why do you need to become a socialist right now? Like, come behind the table with me and actually convince other people. That was something that I left the whatever occupied play with, because I think the opportunity is huge. And I feel like it is part of the United Front discussion. But anyway, just wanted to put that out there. I wanted to kind of sort of give a bigger picture of occupied play, but also put that question out there.
As the green jacket in the back right corner here. Paul? Me? Okay.
One of the arguments of the United Front, an argument that Trotsky made, was the need for revolutionaries to work with the leadership of organizations that we don't agree with necessarily. But to do that in order to move into common action with the membership of those organizations, in order to win more people to a revolutionary politics. And I want to raise this because I think in the Occupy movement now there is really unprecedented chances for us to do this. To give an example of something that we're doing in Burlington for November 17th, is we're organizing a rally and a teach-in associated with that to save the post office. Now, because of circumstances set up by a bipartisan bill 6 or 7 years ago, the Postmaster General has the post office on the chopping block to gut the contract, to lay off 120,000 workers, to close a bunch of post office branches. The leadership of the postal union's response to this is to focus on getting a new piece of legislation through a Republican Congress in order to solve the budgetary problem, which has 0 chance, right? So what we are doing, we want to involve the postal union